inside the public transport system, and that's now running. We've increased bus drivers' wages, we've reduced bus and train fares, and we've also accelerated the restoration of native ecosystems and wetlands and forests and waterways in our regional parks. My own background is in setting up and running organisations and campaigns. I've had experience working with business, with public sector and with charities, and I've got a range of governance experience both inside the council where I've chaired the climate committee and outside the council. So with your support, if I'm re-elected, I want to first of all acknowledge that the bus system isn't working as well as it should be, and we need to get to grips with that. As others I'm sure will say, this is partly, in large part, a problem of driver recruitment and retention. So that's, I think, the root cause there is valuing our public transport system and our public transport workers more. I guess we'll get into that through the questions. I want to strengthen the relationships that we've got, which are already stronger, I think, over the last few years with mana whenua. I think we all benefit from that. I'd like to help to position the Regional Council as an organisation that can support communities with the impacts of climate change, sea level rise, slips, floods, droughts in parts of the region as well, but also to help our communities to reduce their own emissions in various ways. I would like to help to accelerate some of the big projects that we're working on, including mass transit through the city and reallocation of road space for bus priority and so on. I think that could be useful up these parts too. I want to make sure that urban development to welcome more people to our city and our region happens in a way that is balanced with our environment and with our natural ecosystems and our waterways. Is that the 4?
That's
the 315. Okay, sorry. And yeah, I was just thinking of some things. We were asked to think about some things that are specific to this area. I mean, I think for the Northern Wood, I think the Porirua stream is something that we could help maybe a bit more with on the Regional Council. I'd love to hear views on that. And I just did want to mention with the light rail, I have heard some consideration that if the number 1 route was replaced by light rail, then the direct route between Johnsonville and the southern suburbs of Wellington would go. But actually, the plan is for the number 3 to continue up to Johnsonville. So there would still be a direct route with the introduction of light rail. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I'll try and get the number right this time. Chris Kelvey-Freeman, come up, please.
Good evening, everyone. Chris Kelvey-Freeman's my name. Born and raised in Wellington, lived in Haitauhai all my life except for 16 years overseas when I was privileged to be able to work in Sydney and in London on transport planning, including contribution to the Sydney and London Olympics. I'm a transport planner by profession, started my career in New Zealand Railways and found myself reasonably quickly in the position where I was managing the suburban trains and railway suburban buses. Fun fact, travelled up and down the Johnsonville line one Sunday on a motorised jigger with some consultants trying to figure out what options there might be for the Johnsonville line when it was really at risk at that stage. Then Roger Douglas came along and said everything was going to be deregulated, so I found myself working as the first manager of public transport at the Regional Council. They hadn't used the word greater in those days, but they were the Regional Council. And with a very small team working, 7 days a week, we managed to review every bus and train service in the region and put in a network that served the region pretty well from 1991 until 2018. Yes, there were intervening changes during that period, but the basic network was intact, 1991 to 2018 with deregulation. Meanwhile, I went overseas to Sydney and London, as I mentioned, and came back in 2014, ran successfully for the Wellington City Council, where I did 1 term, was narrowly defeated for a 2nd term in 2019. While I was on the City Council, I started to become very concerned about what I was hearing about the consultants' views about how transport should be reorganised for the next major review, 2018, and as you all know, there was something they called bus-tastrophe, I was one of the people that warned about it, but probably not vocally enough, and even I was surprised at how badly it was. Ironically, Johnsonville did quite well out of it, and of course what happens, it's human nature, is that those areas that lost kicked up a big fuss, and those areas that gained quietly said, oh, that's good, we've been lucky. So I acknowledge that there have been some good things. I also acknowledge that colleagues who were working at the Regional Council at the time and are currently in service at the Regional Council have worked very hard to address the faults from the bus catastrophe, and a lot of the problems have been addressed and rolled back. But there's still a problem, of course, with bus driver shortages. In short, I'd like to see us moving ahead. I think we've only scratched the surface of what we can do in public transport. Let's Get Wellington Moving. We had an agreement in principle between the three agencies at the end of 2019 when I left the City Council. And as an outsider looking in, but reading a lot of the reports, it seems it's been an awful slow 3 years from then till now. And only now are things, with the election coming up, starting to become clearer as to the new proposals. I don't think we can just consider, none of us are getting any younger. We can't have this process of year after year after year of paralysis by analysis. We really need to move ahead. And one of the things I would like to do if I get seated on the Regional Council is examine some of that stuff and push for it and start asking the hard questions. Why would it take another 10 years or whatever to have a light rail service? Why are some of these changes so slow, and why are there so many dozens of consultants working? Happy to answer any questions when you come to them, but that's me. I have what I describe as a lifelong professional commitment to better transport, whether that's public transport, roads, and the various modes that run on it, and a lifelong professional commitment to trying to make better, more efficient local and regional government. And I've proved that in a long career, including service in London and in Sydney, where I did get a couple of awards. And later I'll tell you about meeting the Queen if you want. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'll ask Yarana Saw to step up and make her presentation now.
Nā mihi o te pō, he mihi ane ki te mana whenua, te Aotearoa, Taranaki Whānui, Ngā Tito o Rangatira, e mihi ana all to you for coming here this evening and listening to us to tell us why you should be choosing 5 of us for a regional council. My name is Yarana Saw. My family came to New Zealand from Burma. I've had an extraordinary time growing up in Wellington, and that's partially why I want to run for Greater Wellington Regional Council. But before I tell you more about myself and what my vision is for our region, I just want us all to reflect for a minute about our favourite body of water. Is it a beach? Is it a lake? Is it a river? Is it a creek or a stream that you played in as a child, or that you played with your children or your grandchildren? And how might you have travelled there? Did you just walk there? Did you take your bike? Maybe you travelled by air to that favourite place, or overland, or even by sea. I think that's really the fundamental reason why I'm running for Regional Council, because Greater Wellington Regional Council is responsible for our region's beaches, lakes, rivers, streams, creeks, all that fresh water and coastal water. And it also has a huge role in how we travel there. So you would hear a lot of us talking about public transport tonight, that's one of them, but water quality and how our relationship with nature will continue is a really big reason why that I'm standing here. It's also with the effects of climate change that we're starting to feel around us. We want to ensure that that is there for future generations, not just a memory that lives in us, but that is an experience that we can share and ensure for future generations. So I became an environmentalist and aware of climate change when I was a wee pup and about 11 years old, and that has always informed my politics and my work. Growing up in Wellington, I was born in Newtown. My parents were New Zealanders here. I've had such a privilege of being part of nature, of working in the film industry, of working in broadcasting. I've also worked in youth development and health and many NGOs as well. And in that time, from maybe late teens to now, I've always been involved in governance and management with a focus on sustainability, with a focus on inequality, with a focus on ensuring that there are services and resources there for future generations and for us as well, and respecting the work of those who came before us. It's also been a wonderful life here where I've had the privilege of playing on Alex Moore Park as a footballer and having to yell many times of keeping the ball on the deck because there's a beautiful special wind that comes through that field. And also I had the privilege of in your area learning to be a parent, as my midwife's rooms were just across the road and I had to learn to do mum things in this very building. So that's my small connection to your rohe. In terms of how my vision for our region, obviously public transport's a huge one in terms of a bus driver, workforce strategy, how we can retain and attract people to stay in that job and respect the profession, restoring and protecting our urban streams. That's a huge part of flood mitigation and keeping us safe from climate change and ensuring our water is clean, and also ensuring that our relationship with mana whenua is strong and will take us through to the future with respect and a lot of progress. So I look forward to answering a lot of your questions and hearing about your thoughts on what you want your regional councillors to do. Kia ora.
Thank you, Iana. I now ask Chris Montgomery to come up and make his presentation.
Kia ora koutou, ko Chris Montgomery tōku ingoa. I'm standing for Greater Wellington Regional Council because I want to make sure that there's no delay in climate change adaptation. I work with young people and educators, and I'm a mum, and I'm seeing more and more young people being a bit more uncertain about their future because they can't really see beyond the effects of climate change that they're witnessing. I grew up rurally and developed a love for the environment really early on. I've studied New Zealand ecology at university when I was doing a management degree. I majored in communications, so ended up going down the corporate communications track, but found myself always working within sustainable development roles and doing project work for more environmentally focused organisations. I'm proud to introduce myself as a mum. In fact, my 3 daughters are my priority, and so that's why I'm running. It's sort of for their future, really. And being a mum has really connected me with my community. I've been living in Hataitai for 25 years. I was involved in Play Centre for 12 of them, and that really showed me the concept of taking a village to raise a child. And so my community connect, I've seen the benefits of having really strong, resilient and robust communities. I spent 10 years on the Board of Trustees at Kilburnie School, and just recently got given a long service certificate for being on the Board of Trustees. And when I left Play Centre, I started doing other volunteer work at the Innermost Community Gardens in Mount Victoria, and that's a community garden whose mission is connecting people through hands in the soil, and we try and make the place as accessible and inviting for as many different parts of the community as possible, and really focus on keeping care, connecting people and the environment. Through that, I've learned a lot about food resilience, making very good compost, and about organic soil health and regeneration. Why am I standing? So, as I said, Greater Wellington Regional Council is responsible for protecting the environment while considering social, cultural and economic needs of the community, and I think that that's the lens that I bring to everything. And I think climate change, I said it earlier, I'm here for climate change, and climate change is an environmental issue, but as soon as you start thinking about adaptation planning and seeing how we might have to live differently because of climate change, then it becomes quite a social one quite quickly. You start thinking about communities most at risk, and then it becomes a treaty issue, and then you're also looking at ground that's at risk of flooding, and then you're looking at marae and urupa. So I do like to see a systems view, see how things are interconnected, and I think I can make a difference on the Regional Council. In terms of what we'll do for your area, I think the thing about Greater Wellington, it does give you that the ability to see quite widely and see how interconnected all the systems are. So I would say that work that's done on climate change adaptation for the region will be of benefit to people in your area, and same with work on the transport system, and same with the work on the infrastructure, because we've got to get it right for everyone. I am really, the work that I've done in the education sector, sort of seeing how people move from just thinking about their school to thinking about a community of learners or the wider region is really important, and I see that the Regional Council as being a great vehicle for that too. Thank you. Look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'll call upon Roger Blakely to make his presentation.
Ko Roger Blakely, ko taku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Roger Blakely, and thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you to the organisers from Johnsonville Community Association for this opportunity to speak to you and listen to your concerns that you would like us to follow on if we're elected. So first of all, I'd just like to tell you a bit about my background. So I'm a born and bred Wellingtonian. I had a career starting off as a civil engineer, and did a degree at Canterbury University and did a PhD in earthquake engineering, very useful in Wellington. But then I decided I'd follow a path in the public service. So I've had a career which has involved being Chief Executive in Ministry for the Environment. I set up the Ministry for the Environment in 1986 and then led it right through the Resource Management Act stage, and also Chief Executive of the Department of Internal Affairs and of Porirua City Council, your next door neighbour. And then I went to Auckland as the Chief Planning Officer for the Auckland Super City at the start of that in 2010. Then I came back to Wellington and decided to try and cross over the governance table to the other side, the dark side of the light side, depending on your view. And so I stood for and got elected to the Regional Council and also the Capital and Coast District Health Board. And I've served on both for the last two terms, and I'm offering myself again for a third term. So just a bit about the particular focus that I've had over the last 3 years. I've been chair of the Transport Committee. And the Transport Committee and the Regional Council, I think, have done a great job, if I may say so, in the transport and climate change area. We've had a really can-do council and a can-do group of officers. And the sort of things we've managed to do, for example, is we started off the term with only a few electric buses running around the streets of Wellington. We now have 83. We've committed to a fully electric bus fleet by 2030. We now have an Ikariri electric ferry operating across the harbour, the first in the Southern Hemisphere. We have a new Auckland Airport Express bus service, which is also electric. And also we have really tried to tackle these problems around the bus driver shortage, which I think have affected other parts of Wellington more than it's affected you. I did a brief survey when I came in here, and I understand the number one service hasn't been too badly affected by cancellations except recently. But the number 50s, at least they come regularly, if not exactly on time. So you've got a few problems. We've had some major problems in other parts, like the number 2 service going from Karori to Seaton and Miramar, or the number 27 service going down to Houghton Bay. And at the heart of it, I think, is the most fundamental issue probably is around the terms and conditions of the drivers. We have a major bus driver shortage. We know we have about 120 drivers short. We need to lift the wage conditions which they have, which are very poor, I think. Like when we started off 3 years ago, $18 an hour basic. We've tried to crack those up as far as $27 an hour average. We need to go further, we think. We have to offer a wage for bus drivers that's competitive with other heavy duty driving issues. So we probably need to go up to around about $35 an hour or more. So it's going to be a major theme for the next term. Just quickly, some of the issues about the Takapu Northern Ward. I know you've got a major issue around this whole complex here in the middle of Johnsonville, and a desire to develop it as a more vibrant commercial
recreational area. That's 3:15, is it?
No,
That's
that's 4.
That's 4, okay. So I really enjoy any questions you like to ask us, and particularly around the issues around what particularly affect and your concerns around the Northern Ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. I'll now ask Thomas Bryan to come up and make his presentation.
And kia ora, thank you so much for coming out this evening. Why am I standing for the Regional Council? I've never stood for the council before. I've had years of being involved as writing submissions to the Regional Council and the City Council. I've been on a number of both regional and City Council committees, and I thought it's time I make a lot of noise about some issues, and I thought it's high time that I actually stood up and was accounted for making a difference. What do I want to make a difference about? So climate change, we've heard quite a bit talked about that. I think we all are in agreement that we actually need to do something, and we need to do something rather quickly. But we also need to make sure what we do is accessible for everybody. Quite often, whatever actions that are taken exclude a number of our community. Likewise with engagement. Quite often we post things out on Facebook or whatever, but there are many people in the community, in our old age group, in low economic families, and in the disability community who don't have access to the internet, Facebook or smartphones, but we exclude them, and we need to do better at engaging with our communities. Public transport, that's another of my hot topics. You know, there's been some great work, and I've been heavily involved with the Regional Council with their Access Charter and with their Public Transport Advisory Group, but we still miss the mark. You know, we have a pilot scheme running at the moment in Tawa, which is great to see, on-demand bus service. But you've got to have a mobile phone that's a smartphone to be able to book a ride. You have to use a credit card to pay for the ride. So that excludes a number of the community who live in Tawa. That's to me, is where we're missing the mark. We have a great transport hub here in Tawa, in Johnsonville, sorry. We've got great library facilities, we've got a great bus stop, but how do you get across to the train? You've got to walk all the way down the other end of the road to cross over, unless you take your life in your hand and you run across the road to the station. The buses and the trains should be more integrated, and we need to see more integration, more accessibility. We build out these new bus stops, like the City Council has done, but they're not level boarding. So someone in a wheelchair, someone like me who's just had knee surgery, can't even lift their leg high enough to get on the bus. So we need to have better infrastructure. And you know, as I said, the Regional Council's done a great piece of work in some of its improvements, but we need to do better, and we need to be more inclusive of the whole of society. We don't want to leave anyone behind. So me, I've been involved in the disability and the not-for-profit sector most of my life. I've advocated for others. I've stood on the picket line with the bus drivers to get better conditions. I've marched up Queen Street with a community who saw that they were being challenged and treated unfairly. And I've supported fellow workers who are being bullied in the workplace, just to name a few. And so I'm really keen to hear your concerns, but also really keen to, if I get elected, to make a huge difference in making our network, our systems, our environment more accessible, more livable for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Now I ask Lee Catley to finally come up here and make her presentation.
Thanks, Warren. Thank you, Johnsonville, for welcoming us. It's fantastic to get such a turnout. It's really, really hard to get people engaged with local government and local body elections, and pat yourselves on the back for making the effort. It's really hard to do. My name's Lee Catley. I am sort of a born and bred Wellingtonian, or a born, bred and returned Wellingtonian. I think I've come back to live in the city at least 4 or 5 times with my family and on my own. It's a great place to live. Wellington is a very, very special place, and I think Johnsonville is a very special community within it. I've got friends here, good friends, who have raised their kids and even brought up their families and turned around and retired, and you know that here, and it's just it's a little town within a bigger city, and I think it's a special community you've got going on here. I worry though that you are being let down by the City Council and the Regional Council, and one of the reasons I'm standing, and this is my first time, I haven't been on council before, is that you're not being heard, you're not being listened to, and that needs to change. Interacting with the Regional Council is difficult. For some reason it has 2 websites. It's very difficult to actually watch a meeting online. These are the sorts of things I want to change. My job, you might have picked up by now, is as a professional communicator. I started out a long time ago as a journalist. I worked as a journalist for 10 years. My last job as a journalist was with Radio New Zealand. I worked for the New Zealand Press Association as well. I worked for the Australian Associated Press too. I understand the power of communication, especially when I went over to the dark side. I worked in public relations. For the last 15 years, I've worked for the primary sector. I've worked here in Wellington for associations and that have been working with farmers and growers. And one of the things I've learnt working with those guys is talk straight, tell people what you think, don't have a hidden agenda, and ask the hard questions. And that kind of fitted with me, with my journalism background, and that's what I would do if I was on the council. I would be asking, why? Why is this like this? Why has this community not got enough parking around its railway station? Why is it too hard to cross the road to get to the railway station? And listening to people about what it is they just really need. And often it's just really simple things. It's really basic things that can be fixed. Doesn't mean putting your rates up by another 10%. It's just basic stuff. So if you listen to people, they'll tell you what they want. So a little bit more about me, I suppose. I have been a small business owner as well. I have a part share in a hairdressing salon in Wellington with my hairdresser, which means I always know where she is, which is really good. Some people will appreciate that. I stayed with the hairdressing industry and was on the board of Hair and Barber New Zealand for a couple of years, which was really interesting. The thing about hairdressers is they listen, and I learnt that from being part of their board. It was very, very interesting to be in a group where they actively listened, and it was a powerful thing. So yes, I'd just like to say that if you give me your vote, and even the number 1 vote would be nice, thank you very much. I would like to be back here in 3 years' time and not apologising to you about the bus that you couldn't catch.
Thank you, Lee. I'll now ask Darren Potter to come up and make his presentation.
Kia ora koutou. Good evening, everybody. My name's Darren Ponter. I'm the current chair of the Greater Wellington Regional Council and have been since late 2019, so most of that time has been spent, just like you, in a COVID environment, dealing with the trials and tribulations that brings to a local authority in service to you as a community. My background is as a regional planner. I started life in another regional council somewhere else in the country, and I've worked in the natural resource area, and that's really what attracted me to come and work for the regional council, first of all, and then later on to stand as a regional councillor. But one thing you learn in Wellington is
for the fact that Wellingtonians have a respect for the environment and have a keenness to move on climate change, the buses are ever present as an issue, and they certainly have been over the last 4 or 5 years. So that still remains a key focus. It's difficult to compartmentalise the environment part, our environmental protection part of the Regional Council, and the transport part. The two don't necessarily connect very well. It's quite an eclectic organisation. When you add harbour functions, the regional plans, the fact that we provide the water that you drink from reservoirs in Upper Hutt, Wainui and Mata, and from the Hutt Valley Aquifer, it really is a mishmash of things. And that makes governance all the more important for the Regional Council. It means it makes it important that we have a strong, functioning group of councillors that can speak respectfully to each other, that can talk through the issues and come to consensus on issues. And in this term of the council, we have come to consensus on the vast majority, and I'm talking 95% plus of decisions, by talking out the issues rather than shouting at each other. And I think that we owe that to you as a community in the way that we conduct ourselves. And in part, that's what I offer to you as, if you like, a mediator in that process. Not a light mediation, not heavy mediation, but somebody who brings people together and tries to find consensus. We have councillors, and we will in the next term have councillors that come from disparate parts of the political spectrum, and we need to find ways of talking to each other so that we can make decisions with you as a community. On a similar vein, and just to touch on a topic that others haven't, we have a lot of business as usual things, the buses, the environment, climate change and what have you. We've also got some big structural things coming at us, and that makes it all the more important to have strong governance in the coming term. So 3 Waters, you know about. That's going to rip the heart out of a lot of local authorities, including a key function of the Regional Council. Resource Management Act reforms, entire replacement of the Resource Management Act with a new regime. We have to explore with you as a community how we are going to position ourselves in that new environment, because you will be dealing with a new organisation, not the Regional Council, not the City Council, that is actually progressing a new plan that rams together the district plan and all the regional plans into one document. And then finally, the government has also got proposals around local government reform, and so 3 big reform exercises potentially coming in the next 18 months, and a change of government isn't going to change that. Changing government, we will still need to face down 3 Water reform and the RMA. So big things coming, and I'm just hoping that I've gained some respect for you over the last 3 years to be able to continue in the role. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. And thank you to all the candidates for your presentations. It's given quite a lot of information from a wide range of views on what's going to happen going forward, and that will be helpful to the audience. We're now going to take a 10-minute break, and this provides members of the audience with the opportunity to ask questions, and we'll do that through Penny. Where is Penny? Penny's got a raffle ticket, which you don't have to pay for.
Do you win anything?
And if you want to ask a question, you get a raffle ticket from Penny, and we'll put those in a hat and we'll draw them out at random for the second half. So we'll take a 10-minute break from now. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thanks, Mark. That's very good.
He just wants to say a few words. So Tony, if you just come up.
Hi. Well, so just I missed the official part, but I have come here. So Tony Randall, I just wanted to say that I'm running for the City Council for the Northern Ward, and I'm from Johnsonville, president of the Johnsonville Community Association, and I'm running. This is me So I'm running as an independent, non-political party person, and I'm running on a sort of they've got to do the basics well sort of platform rather than fund the pipes and that sort of stuff. Do the basics well for us, and that's where I'm coming from. So if you want to come and talk to me, grab a brochure, please. Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, Warren.
Right, now we'll start the question and answer session. Now the tickets are all in the hat over there, and they'll be drawn out randomly by penny. That's to be fair to all of the questioners. Right, yes. And I think when we're answering the questions, we'll start at one end with one question, the next question will start at the other end. I just want to go over some of the ground rules regarding this process, the Q&A process, because it can get quite heated, and hopefully that won't happen. Questioners, I just ask that you be clear about the issue of concern, and your question is also clear. Be succinct. Indicate whether you want all the candidates to answer the question, or if you want individual candidates or incumbent candidates to respond. Speak clearly. And to the candidates, I ask the question being asked be answered on point and to not diverge into other areas. Be succinct and speak clearly. And to both questioners and candidates, I want the session to be carried out in a respectful manner by both questioners and candidates. We followed that directive on Saturday night with the Northern Ward candidates, and we had a really great Q&A session, which many people said was very enjoyable. So, without further ado, I'll ask Penny to tell us the first ticket number, which is 65. Would you put your hand up?
Hey, winner, winner, chicken dinner.
Hi, I'm Ian. Johnsonville needs a proper hub off Moorfield Road that provides shelter for commuters from the elements, unlike what we've got now. Would you be proactive with the mall and other landowners and work together to develop a sheltered hub integrated with the proposed mall development?
Do you want that for all the candidates?
All.
Right. Now, just we'll start here. Thomas?
I guess the short answer is yes. I made those comments along in my address before. Johnsonville needs a proper hub that's integrated with the mall, so people don't have to cross the busy road to get to and from the bus and the train. So most definitely yes.
Yeah, and I'd say sort of the same sort of thing, and I think I kind of alluded to it in my long speech as well. I don't think this community has been well served at all by combined efforts to plan ahead and think about the future in terms of what's going on in the middle of the community. So yes, if I was on the council, I would be putting a great deal more effort into trying to figure out how to sort it out.
It's not the worst hub, but it's pretty bad as it is. Yes, absolutely work with Stride. Is Stride still involved? If Stride doesn't take great strides, we should kick them in the strides and tell them that we need great strides.
I like that.
I'd absolutely support that. I think anything to encourage people to be able to safely use public transport and to use the utilities and the shops around here is really important. Also that connectivity with other parts of our region as well. I know that in the last term, Greater Wellington Regional Council has been doing work to upgrade other subways and bus stops and hubs, so I'm very surprised that that hasn't happened in Johnsonville, but I would hope that you would be top of the list. Well, I'm not with them all, but...
Yes, Anne, absolutely. So it seems to be that Johnsonville Mall is crying out for what we call transit-oriented development. How do you integrate together a commercial development and other activity with your transport system? So what you're saying is could be exactly part of that. We have, as a regional council, started looking at Waterloo Station and Porirua and Kapiti as possible transit-oriented development. I can't see any reason why we don't add Johnsonville to the list. And if that's something that the community would support, I'd be very strongly supportive.
Firstly, apologies for my phone, and I hope you didn't hear the song, because it was I Am the One.
Very apt.
Yeah. Look, yes, I agree that you do need a safe hub here, and it needs to be looked at. I am aware that there are, as Mr. Covey-Freeman said, at times problems when independent property developers get involved, and then they have to be unravelled and actually worked properly, but I would be totally supportive.
I agree too. It's really important for people, if they're wanting to access public transport, to access it safely, and having a road in between community facilities isn't very conducive to community being able to commune. So I think in terms of infrastructure projects or public transport projects, having good modal hubs is really important for people to be able to get on, across, and connect with their other community amenities. So I'd support that.
All right, thanks for the question, and yes, I would certainly support it. Two things I'd say. There are quite a lot of issues in terms of integration between rail and bus around the network, as Thomas Bryan, I think, mentioned in his opening remarks, and we do need to look at all of them, and certainly here is a place we do. The other thing I'd say is, with the redevelopment of the Johnsonville Mall area, it could take a while because there is, large private property owner involved, so I wouldn't want to wait until we've got a kind of master plan for that before putting in place a hub here. I wouldn't want to make it contingent on the whole Johnsonville Mall development happening before we can do it. So thanks.
So I think at the heart of the question really is stride, and how long, how much longer we want to believe that they're actually going to do a development on the property. I've certainly got to the end of my tether on it, and I wouldn't usually say this because I think that the legislation is quite draconian, but this is one instance where I think the Public Works Act needs to be used by the City Council and the Regional Council to take the portion of land that we need to build a proper hub that can be integrated with whatever Stride does in the future. But we don't need to wait for them, we just need to move on.
Number 67. Put your hand up, please. Thank you.
Hi candidates. This question, the key word is here, H-E-R-E, and it's intentionally an intuitive, kind of a bit abstract question, but it's a pretty simple one. So what I want to ask you is, if you are going to build a bridge to here, take Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington, New Zealand, or to Johnsonville, what does here mean to you? So if in the first instance you were to invite yourself here, and also others here, what does here mean to you? I know you've spoken to this a little bit already, so thank you so much, but just, yeah, what is here?
I'll start at this end. So, because I'm a regional planner, I think in regional terms. It doesn't mean I don't have a local lens, but the reminder for voters is that regional councillors sign a pledge, and that pledge is to the region. And so the here for me, the landing point for a bridge is our region. The challenge is how we bring communities and stitch together those communities into the bridge.
Yeah, well, thank you for the deeply philosophical question. I guess, yeah, I guess I've got to choose a way to answer it, don't we? So I think I'll say here is a place where everyone has an opportunity to express themselves, to fulfil their aspirations and their wishes and exercise their talents in a place where we don't judge each other too much, where we listen to each other, respect each other and help each other. Thanks.
I think the COVID lockdown, the first one, was actually quite a good time for a lot of people to reflect on what their ideal here might be. It was a time that people paused, got out, didn't drive their cars, listened to birdsong, connected with people on their street that they don't receive very often. So that kind of thriving communities, thriving environment would be the kind of here that I'd like to see and welcome people to.
I'm going to talk about here as a regional councillor, and here as a regional councillor for me is all of the different areas that the regional council covers, and it's really important that we are able to marry together the needs of all of the people from all of those areas to make their place here for them.
Here for me is a very vibrant community. And my sense is that people like yourselves who live in this Johnsonville area feel fiercely proud of Johnsonville. It's a place you're proud to live in and belong to and work in. It's also a very connected community, I think, in terms of transport links to Porirua one way and to Whanganui-a-Tara Harbour the other in Wellington City, and also the rail. I'm sad because the here should, in a sense, have a strong beating heart here in the Johnsonville Mall, and it doesn't. And we've already traversed the reasons for that, and Stride are probably #1 villain there. So that's my sense of here.
I'm really excited about this question because it's not policy related, so thank you for taking us a bit out of policy world. It's a great question. For me, here is a place where everyone belongs, which I think summarises a lot of what some of the other candidates have said. And from a regional council perspective, for me, here is but a point in time of a continuum of those who have belonged before us, of what we have inherited from them. I would say perhaps at a local authority level we haven't really been inherited with a good lot from our infrastructure failures, some of the challenges we're going to have to quickly meet with climate change, with cost of living crisis and so forth, some of the issues with public transport, also the local issues here with the mall. But if we are someone else's past when they are here and they are belonging, it's also an opportunity for what are we going to leave as our legacy. And I think that's, to me, what regional council is. It's this huge region, but it's also water, air and land. And these live far beyond us, and they've lived far before us. So for me it's belonging, and it's for us really respecting the time that we're here, so that is there for the future.
First, I'd say what a wonderful question, a philosophical question, and there isn't an answer I've heard along here that has not stimulated me. So I say hear to all those who have already contributed.
I've done every meeting, Chris.
I've done at every meeting, but I'd also say that when I hear the word here, I sometimes think of the expression here and now. And I think one of the issues with a regional council is that by nature it is a strategic organisation, and it's not necessarily concerned enough, as I'm in my view, with the here and now. It's fine to have strategic plans, it's fine to have visions, but I think some of us are getting a little bit irritated and want to see some improvement, some change here and now, not here and next decade or here in the decade afterwards.
Thank you for that question. I'm really interested actually to know what you think. I'd like to know what you think here. You've really got me thinking, and I'm quite glad I'm at the end of the row. I've been thinking, in terms of a bridge, that's an interesting concept too, and people arriving. I've actually got somebody arriving from America to work with us as an intern on Friday, and you started me thinking about what would I want her to see when she's here and what she's going to take away when she leaves us and goes back to the States. I think it's about people. I think I want her to come here and experience what it is to be a Wellingtonian and what it is to live in our environment and appreciate how much we love where we are and why we are here. And I want her to take that away with her.
Well, try to find an answer that's slightly different, because many of the answers have been along similar lines to what I was going to say. But to me, here is where the heart is for those who live here, but also for those who visit here. Here should be a destination where people want to come and want to visit. But to me, what's missing as part of the here is that the mall is a dead spot, but it's very difficult to go north from here using public transport. The train doesn't go north any further. So to me, here is a bridge, but here you have to have a destination as well as a place of living, a place of home where the heart is.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Ticket number 61, if you put your hand up, please. Thomas, I'll give that back to you.
So I'm Mark, I'm part of the Johnsonville Community Association as well. My question is to all of you about mass rapid transit and what your idea is, thinking that when you look at this audience, most of them are retired, soon to be retired. How are you going to pay for it? And thinking about what's happened with Transmission Gully in Auckland with the budget blowouts.
John, what a large question. I'll try and answer some of it, but I also want to make sure that I can leave something for my colleagues as well here. So I think we're all in agreement, what we were the other night at a meeting, that light rail is probably going to be the best solution for mass rapid transit. It has capacity, it has, it's designed well, and for me, it's built so no matter what your age is, what your abilities are, it will be level boarding, and so anyone will be able to wheel on, step onto it, there won't be any steps involved, so it will be a great experience for everyone. How it's going to be funded? Well, I think some of that's already been decided. Some of it will be funded through central government, and some of it will be funded locally. And so obviously some of that will come through fares, some of it will come through, I guess the regional council will borrow money, or Let's Get Wellington will borrow money, and it'll have to be paid back at some stage. But it certainly will be there, and certainly light rail is the option for me that I think that will give us best value for money.
Yeah, I certainly go along with the light rail concept. The other thing I think is really exciting is the whole idea of on-demand public transport, and I know there's a great deal of effort going into making that work in Timaru, and I think they're doing a trial in Tower as well. Guys down the other end will be able to tell you more about that. I think there's a lot of scope for thinking about the timetabling and about the changes that COVID has made to the way we live and the way we work, the working from home concept, and what that's done to peak hour travel and do the timetable. Does timetabling actually reflect that? I live right smack in the middle of Wellington in a little flat, and I can tell you that Saturday and Sunday in the CBD is busier than a Monday and Tuesday now. But that's not reflected in a timetable. So those are the sorts of things I'd like to see tackled if I was on the council.
Good question. Let's start with a bit about affordability. Every generation pays for and builds things for the next generation. Our forefathers paid for the Wellington Town Hall that we enjoy, and we are paying for it. It's complete refurbishment and strengthening now for the next generation. Costs can be smoothed out by borrowing, as people have said, but everybody pays. And the thing is not whether everyone should pay. It's, are we getting value for money? Are we investing in the right things at the right costs, or are we blowing money on the wrong things? I'm in agreement with others here that mass rapid transit should be light rail, but I'll go a step further. Johnsonville should not be left out of this. The Johnsonville line, which I've studied on a number of occasions over the years, is ripe for refurbishing. Light rail should extend from the airport in Miramar and or Island Bay through Newtown, where it connects with hubs like the Kilbirnie Aquatic Centre, the zoo, the hospital, the various schools at the Basin Reserve, through Tiaro, through the CBD, past the railway station, and should then take on the Johnsonville line. Now, there are issues about capacity. It's not enough capacity with the smaller trains, but there are plenty of places where further crossing loops can be put in, and in the very long term, widening or daylighting tunnels and turning it into 2 tracks. Imagine your descendants being able to get on light rail from their homes in Johnsonville, Kandala, etc., and come all the way through to all those other attractors in the city. That's my vision, and I'd like to see more work done on that. It has been looked at. I want to see it looked at again.
Thank you all for answering what I was going to say as well. I'll help you along as well down the line. I too am supportive of light rail because it's about investing in the future. And from my experience of overseeing capital refurbishments of as a board of trustees at my school, as part of the chairperson of an ECE where it made financial sense to close down, but instead we bought and refurbished our building, I very much have seen the benefit of taking what seems like a huge risk for ultimately benefit for the community. And that's what I think we're doing here with light rail. And that's what we should do, as our public institutions are here for other reasons other than a financial return or fiscal. I mean, of course you'd be fiscally responsible, but there are other values that we need to look at of what's good for our community, what's good for our planet, and what's good for those who are working in it. So I'd say light rail is a really important investment and a great way of making sure things are good for the future. I hope that I will have a gold card by the time it's operating, so I can ride it, if gold cards still exist then. So I would say that I would, if I was chosen by you to be your representative on Greater Wellington Regional Council, I'd want to accelerate the project so that we can all at least enjoy the light rail.
So I've had a few conversations with members of the community here tonight, and I sense in this room there's a very strong support for bus rapid transit as the preferred option. I've actually read the submission that the Johnsonville Community Association made on Let's Get Wellington Moving, written by Tony Randall, I think, and that made a strong case for bus rapid transit. In terms of what the decision was, which was announced by Michael Wood and Grant Robertson for the government, by Wellington City Council and Greater Wellington Regional Council, all of those 3 organisations said they preferred option 1 as their first choice, which is the option of light rail from the railway station down through Kilbirnie and down through Newtown and to Berhampore and Island Bay. But they also said that they wanted bus rapid transit kept as a contingency in case light rail didn't pan out for whatever reason. Bus rapid transit is being included in the next stage, which is the detailed business case to be picked up if, for whatever reason, we can't make light rail work. In terms of the point about affordability, so in the indicative business case, the light rail option was about $5.3 billion. That's total costs, including the operating costs over a 30-year life. Bus rapid transit was not that much less, like about $4.9 billion. So the other thing is I support what Chris Kelby-Freeman's just said, because it seems to me that in a way we've stopped it at the railway station where it should be thinking about how does it connect to Johnsonville, to the Hut, to Porirua, to Kapiti. And so we have been assured by the Let's Get Wellington Moving people that in the next stage, the detailed business case, there will be consideration of how it might go to these places further north. At the moment it would be ridiculous if we just kind of stop at the railway station when in fact probably 3/4 of the population is north of the railway station, so it's really important we do that.
So what Roger's just told you about where the Greater Wellington Regional Council sat is exactly where it sat, and there was strong around the table that we wanted that second option of bus rapid transport to remain in there. One of the reasons as a contingency, and one of the reasons for that from my perspective, is that currently we still do not know where the intensification and where the housing throughout New Zealand is actually going to be placed. And I would hate to see us having light rail or bus rapid transport, for that matter, going to places where we haven't actually intensified at this stage. And due to the whole change in the planning, I think we do need a bit more information on that to actually make that decision. So I'm not sitting in a position of having made a decision. I'm looking at everything and all the potential implications of either of those options.
I've just realised I'm sitting amongst all of the incumbent councillors who've got a whole lot more information and time spent in meetings than I have. But I do want to just address the point that you made about, you know, Transmission Gully and the Auckland blowout. And I think there's lessons that we can take from there, but there's also, isn't it great that it's actually been done? Because Transmission Gully, if that road hadn't finally opened, Wellington would have been cut off with that slip. So, and same with the Waterloo Tunnel in Auckland. As soon as it happened, it was like, whoa, this is just another whole way of connecting the city. Doesn't always have to be roads. Those two examples were, but you've got to be brave and you've got to make the big decisions for big infrastructure. But we can learn a whole lot about what models are best or not in terms of getting the right people to undertake the projects for us to make sure that we're making good decisions to pass on to our future generations.
Thanks for the question. So, yeah, I guess with mass rapid transit, the mode depends on what you're trying to do. And if you want maximum capacity so that you can welcome as the maximum number of new homes and new residents, then you probably need light rail. If you want maybe slightly lower capacity and less housing, then maybe you go for another option like bus rapid transit. I guess my when I weigh those things up, I consider what is the greater risk. Is the greater risk over catering for capacity and housing and people and population growth, or is the greater risk under catering? And when I look at our problems now with water infrastructure and other transport infrastructure, I lean towards thinking that the greater risk is under catering with our infrastructure. So that's sort of my orientation. Your question about how to pay for it, I think, is a good one. And there was a good interview with Michael Wood, the Transport Minister, on RNZ, I think sometime last week. He spent about 20 minutes talking about a range of things, and he was very clear that the National Land Transport Fund, which is the fund that normally pays for all transport infrastructure in New Zealand, is probably not the best way to pay for light rail in Auckland and in Wellington. And in fact, the government's going to need to find other ways to pay for it that don't compete, as it were, with other transport priorities that we will face. Acknowledge Member of Parliament here, who could, Greg O'Connor, who could probably tell us more about that afterwards. But that would be my orientation to how to choose the mode and how to pay for it. Thanks.
So you referred in your question to an older audience, people there in retirement, and I suppose that might be a euphemism for people who are on fixed incomes, where the rates increase that they're likely to see is going to be unavoidable and not something that you can do much about. That's a real issue that we face in inflationary terms at the moment. We have projects within the ambit of the regional council that are now 40% more in cost than they were 18 months ago. Projects as big as $300 million, projects as big as $10 million that are now $14 million or are now $400 million. And so my bigger issue is not whether it's light rail or BRT, which are both on the table at the moment. It is how do we actually drive those costs down and find savings, not just within the light rail part, but the tunnels that we put through Mount Victoria, the Basin Reserve works as well. Because unless we do that, a project that's worth $7.5 billion today is easily going to be $10 billion, and that is only going to come from two sources, really, taxes or rates. And we can find some inventive ways of doing it, like congestion charging, but it's not going to escape the fact that you're going to pay one way or another. So we have to look at cutting costs.
Ticket number 62.
I'm an ex-bus driver. During my time bus driving, you raised my wages. My wages actually started, I think, at $21, and you raised them up to $27. And now, having made that increase, you've got less drivers than you had when you started. So I'm not sure, while I quite like the idea of an increase, I'm not sure that's going to solve the problem, especially since you're going to need more, and you've also got a problem with train drivers being short as well. So how are you actually, what ideas have you got that are actually going to improve the ability to actually maintain bus drivers? Because in the end, bus drivers are also truck drivers, and they can get an easy job without dealing with the public somewhere else.
Yep. Does this question apply to everyone? Or
yeah. So it's a very good question. So bus drivers across the region, on average, you must have retired very recently, because they are $27 an hour, as you said, and we lifted that from $22.50 an hour about 8 months ago. The first time ever that any regional council in the country has stepped into the market between the unions and the operators and said, enough of this, we're going to move it unilaterally by ourselves, and we'll put ratepayers' money on the table to do that.
And they still didn't accept it.
And yes, and the unions and the operators had issues with that, let's say the least.
Madness.
But we have walked back into a situation now where 8 months ago we were at about 40 drivers short, now we're 120 short. And what that says is that the market is very inelastic, that we can continue increasing the wages, but we won't get the drivers, because we do actually have a labour shortage and some issues with conditions and cultural behaviour inside the operators as well. So there are two levers that we're looking to pull, and I would hope that any councillors on the future council would get behind. The first is to increase wages further, because trucking operators are getting $55 an hour, garbage truck drivers are getting $35 an hour. They're the competition in this environment. The other issue is to take off some of the controls on the border restrictions, so that we can get drivers in from overseas, which we have done previously, but not to undermine the existing workforce that we have. So they don't come in on better terms and conditions, they come in on the same terms and conditions. And both of those issues are things that we're working with the government on.
The shortage, the driver shortage is actually worldwide, so where are you getting them from?
Yeah, so and quite correct. We're seeing that through Australia, and certainly in Auckland. I said we had 120 short here, they're 500 short. During the bustastrophe, we imported drivers to Auckland. That's no longer an issue. So these drivers would come from places like Fiji and the Philippines, and they've been sources for drivers in the past.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, and thank you for being a bus driver for a long time. I guess, yeah, well, I agree with everything that Darren has said, and I don't think we have any, well, I'm not going to offer any magic solutions. It's a problem, it's been a problem, it's going to be a problem for a while, unfortunately, and I think we should be honest with you about that. Valuing public transport in general, I think is a problem. We don't value it enough. massively invested in other modes of transport and public transport in New Zealand compared to other countries is not valued enough. So I think that's a sort of general problem. And the workers within the public transport system have also not, I think, been valued enough. I wonder whether the system that we've got where one public agency gets money from various sources and tenders out contracts to various private companies who then employ drivers in various different ways, is that the best way to do it? I'm not so sure. I think there will be changes that are coming through the public transport operating model that might allow different ways for us to procure services and to offer services, and maybe we could have a more direct relationship with the people who work on our public transport system. That's one thing. People are going to mention a whole bunch of stuff, I'm sure. One thing is students who could combine morning shifts before their work as students. We have at least one that I know of who does that, so I don't want to overstate the case there, but there may be ways to recruit people for certain shifts where it's a kind of crunchy period in the morning peak, where they might not know that, well, this is an option actually. You could supplement your income, you could drive a bus, and you could combine it with the rest of your activities, with a student studying or working or something like that.
Thanks for the really informed answers that Darren and Thomas have done.
Sorry. Now's your chance to be creative.
I'm just going to come back to what I know about, and is making sure that employees feel rewarded, and that's not only what you pay them, but it's the conditions that you give them and the thanks that you give them and the status that you give them. So if I get elected to the council, in terms of talking about how the public transport is functioning, the questions to these operators will be, well, what are you doing for your staff, and how are all of these, the wider conditions, actually going to be making sure that people stick with the organisations and with bus driving.
So there's the basic issue, which is there's 120 short, and as you're saying to us, there's not a pool to actually grab from. I think the second part of the issue is that for many years our bus drivers have not been valued. The third part of the issue is the manner in which the contracts are done, where we were kept out, and I was very proud of all of our colleagues in our chair that we actually did step into a place where angels fear to tread under normal circumstances, and worked to make sure that those conditions were improved and the pay rates were improved. And what I would say is I don't think we've done enough yet. I think that needs to actually continue. You wanted me to be creative, so I'll be creative. Right. There's a whole lot of retired policemen out there on superannuation that could probably do the off-peak shifts in the middle, and the students, there's no flexibility to allow for the flexibility of our lives these days. You know, the rules are so tight, and when you're allowed to break and all of those sort of things. And I actually think there would be a more innovative way of actually bringing people in to actually do that. Because I'm not sure why you retired, but you might have been happy if you only did a 3-hour shift a day and carried on, depending on what your lifestyle is. I don't think we have that there. So I think it should come back so that the regional council has more input into it.
Yes, try not to repeat all the good ideas that have already been said. I mean, just to mention for a moment the PTOM model, which was the basis of the contracts which were negotiated, which came into effect in July, which were really the origin of the bus dystrophy. And basically that was set up as a competitive tendering model. And what it meant was the bus tenderers really only had two variable costs they could cut back on. One was the bus operating costs and the other was the bus driver wages. And so, surprise, surprise, they cut back on the bus driver wages. And we know that some of those base rates that those drivers started off at were $18 an hour. That's appalling in my view. And when you think of the responsibilities and challenges and skills required of drivers, that's incredible. And I think it's just the race to the bottom that was created by the PTOM contract. Now, fortunately, the current Minister of Transport, Mr. Michael Wood, sees that, and he's committed to now reforming the PTOM model, and so something different is going to come in. So that's one ray of sunshine. And another thing that we've moved on that hasn't really been mentioned is the whole issue around driver conditions, and we know that the split shifts arrangement, so that drivers had a shift in the middle of this morning peak and a shift in the evening peak, but nothing to do in the middle of the day, and no remuneration, and that was a very unattractive set of conditions. So we have been pushing hard to flatten out those peaks by providing discounts in the middle of the day, so that there's a flatter curve, which means that drivers can now start working 8-hour shifts. So that's something. Another thing that struck me is
The problem with 8-hour shifts is you need more bus drivers to cover them.
well, but rather than people doing a 4-hour shift and then nothing to do in the middle of the day and then another 4-hour shift in the evening, you can then spread it out. So some drivers are getting 8-hour shifts now because of the spreading of those peaks. Another thing is, and this was said to me by the Chief Executive of New Zealand NZ Go Bus, and what his comment was, in the old days, you might be able to comment on this, in the old days there were academies and driving schools, and they actually trained and recruited drivers to bring them into the industry and into the profession, and we don't do that now. So that might be something we could pick up on. So I think there are a lot of things that we can do, and we need to pull every lever we possibly can, I think.
Thank you so much for your question, and thank you so much for taking on the responsibility of driving buses.
Oh, it's great fun.
Yeah, they're quite, yeah. I mean, it's probably like the most high-value vehicle you ever get to drive around all the time, right? So, yeah, I drive a $350,000 every day. Just to reiterate some of the points that have been raised there, I think it's fantastic that the Sustainable Public Transport Framework is about to come in place, which will, for your next training of regional councillors, that will give them a bit more flexibility in what the operating model will look like. I think currently the regional council spends about 63% of its budget on Metlink, on our public transport network. Back of the packet maths, back of the envelope maths would say that's about $400 million a year committed for the next decade. That's a lot of money we're sending to private operators, some of whom are international equity firms. I would like to see our public money going into our public utility, that is public transport. I would like to see it in drivers' wages and improving their conditions, such as the layovers as well as the split shifts as well, because I know that some of the places where bus drivers have to terminate their rides are not up to standard. There's not even toilet facilities or anything like that. In terms of magic solutions, perhaps expanding our on-demand service, so there is a larger but a smaller vehicle fleet may help some of the shortages where you can get a different class. I think you only have to get a P-class license for that, so that could be an interim solution. I think getting more drivers from overseas might put pressure on our housing crisis. So until we solve the housing issue, I think we may be pushing a different problem in society. So that would be my solution. The other thing is that what I'm seeing in a younger generation is that less people are driving.
Exactly.
So what you even have is a smaller pool of potential bus drivers in the future. So again, I would come back to the point of perhaps light rail, and again moving to a smaller on-demand fleet, and perhaps away from the big buses we normally have. Those fancy drive, fancy buses, vehicles you got to drive.
Who would be a bus driver? You have to deal with traffic congestion, narrow roads, the odd cyclist getting in the way, and the odd grumpy passenger. So firstly, I'd like to say to you, thank you, driver. But seriously, and I do mean that seriously, one way of helping to solve the driver shortage in the longer term is to get more productivity from each bus run. Now, more bus priority, fewer delays, fewer buses serving the public by having a higher average speed. Longer term, light rail, one driver transporting several hundred passengers instead of a bus load. I've heard some good comments along here, smoothing the peaks And as you say, you still need a long span to cover both peaks. But maybe that book off in the middle of the day where you get no wages can be reduced so that you actually coin more money for that long day. So there are all sorts of things to think about, and I'm sorry, but I disagree with the smaller buses idea in general. In Britain, when they deregulated public transport, and then in New Zealand they sent someone out to copy the model that came in 1991. The comment over there was many buses, many wages, and it didn't work, and it shouldn't work. So we need to invest in our buses and our drivers.
First of all, and it's a shame he's popped out, I think the fact is that New Zealand's immigration settings are too tight, and we've had 2 years where we've actually found out what it's like to not be able to bring people in from overseas to do an enormous range of things. Everything from aged care assistants to working in hospitality and working as scientists and research. Dairy farmers, thank you. Yes, I knew there was another one in there. So there's that. So this whole situation has come about where we're not on our own trying to deal with this, and that is a problem. But it will come right, hopefully, in time. But yes, I totally get your point about the fact that I think what you're getting at, if I'm right here, is that actually the regional council needs to get way more involved in how the services are run. And they've started to dabble with it, and it just needs to either they get right back into it, or at least be much firmer about what they want to see happen with the staff who are actually working for us. One other thing I thought I would just mention is that it's very, very obvious that women don't want to do this job, and I think we should. Are there? There's not very many going up and down Courtney Place. I haven't seen a woman driving a bus for a long time, and I use them all the time.
Yeah, an Islander, she was just lovely.
Yes, that's what you hear. There was this one woman who was great.
Yeah.
So,
there are lots of
I did 5 or 6 with that.
5 or 6,
Yeah.
yeah. Out of, how many did you say? Yeah. How many bus drivers in total?
Oh, there's about 600 across the network.
And how many are women?
Oh, I don't know what percentage, but I know more than 10 myself.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah,
More than
there's-
10. On an individual basis,
on an
we
individual
know
basis,
more than 10.
Yeah.
So it just appears to me that there must be some issue why women don't want to do it. That's the best comment of the evening right there.
Even Hilary Barry's done it.
All right, I'm
She's
not going
driven
to
one of
repeat everything that everyone else has said, because obviously there's some great ideas, but I'll focus on a couple of areas. Obviously terms and conditions is a huge issue. When I'm able to get on and off buses, use buses to get around all the time. And I know many of the drivers at the Kilburnie depot, and they all watch out for me and are great assets to the company. And what I hear from drivers all the time is lack of acknowledgement. It's not just about the money, poor conditions, lack of training, and no education to the public as to what we do, what we can't do, and why we ask the questions we do of passengers. So for me, it's about the terms and conditions. It's about making it a career that people want to do, and it's about educating the public as to this is somebody who's prepared to drive you from A to B, be respectful, be courteous, and it doesn't cost anything to say thanks, have a great day when you get off the bus. And I think it does need to be seen as a career, and people do need to think that's actually a great job and I'm rewarded for it in lots of ways. Driver training, it used to be a month-long program, I think it was.
6 weeks.
And now it's nothing like that at all. And when I talk to some of the new bus drivers, they don't even know the routes, and they're having to either ask on the RT or even ask the passengers. I was on a bus the other day, new driver, was supposed to go up John Street and down Wallace Street, and the poor driver went down Adelaide Road, and had to try and back and turn into a side street, go back up Adelaide Road and then turn right into John Street. You know, I felt sorry for the driver, and I got off and I said, hey look, thanks for that, you have a great day, and he was so appreciative. And as for the women drivers, there are heaps of them that I've got to chat to on the bus, and I'm forever giving compliments back to Metlink or to the drivers themselves when they go the extra mile, because it's a pretty thankless job that they have to do.
And maybe the summary from us as candidates is, thank you, driver.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have any comments back to us in terms of what you heard?
From my perspective, sorry, and I'll try and be brief about this. I had a ball. I drove buses, I started driving buses in 1976. I did it for about a year then, and then I came back to it after when 2018 hit. And I did 3 years, I finished up in August last year. And those 3 years were an absolute ball. I had one grumpy customer in 3 years, and he was grumpy because he was drunk. And basically I found I didn't feel underappreciated, so I didn't have a problem with the conditions. The wages, you're always arguing for more money, but that's just standard sort of thing. The fact that there is no actual training is, I think, quite a critical problem. And the other side of it, I think, is that in some respects, I think we need to change the model. Two thoughts came through as you were all talking. One was, okay, if you're going to have somebody working at 12, bus drivers don't actually mind. Oh, sorry, the other thing is, it's an all-encompassing job, right? When you're a bus driver, you don't have time, well, at the moment, for the last 3 years, you had time for nothing. You're working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. You had time on your day off to sleep, do your washing, and have a decent feed, and then you're back into the routine again. And that's all right if you want to do it that way, but a lot of people don't. So if you're going to have a 12-hour shift, maybe have 4 12-hour shifts, and then if you're going to have to cover the 2 peaks, pay them in the middle. It's not that much extra that you're losing to actually have the drivers go home or have a break for 4 hours, and you're actually paying them for it. If it suits your purposes. I think that'll do. I mean, I can go on forever.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Could I just ask one quick question? Are you prepared to say who your employer was in the last 3 years?
Yeah, it was Transurban.
Transurban, thank you.
Yeah, I had no problems with it.
Thank you.
Oh, well, I had arguments with them, but that's
thank you.
Story.
Thomas, thank you. This has actually been a really interesting evening in terms of questions and the range of questions from the audience. We have actually got a lot more questions. I just wonder if the candidates are actually interested in taking more questions, and we will finish definitely at 10 o'clock. If the candidates are interested in doing that, we will continue on. 10 o'clock is what I said.
You don't want to lose your audience. Should we say 9:45?
What's the time?
Or
Just
3 more
as
questions.
Or as compromise?
3 more questions? 9:45 or 3 more questions?
Okay.
Okay.
Whichever's
All right.
first.
All right, without further ado, thank you very much.
Excuse me, maybe you could have 3 more questions and half them answer and the other half answer the next question.
Or give us a time limit.
We'll just be quick.
Or
We'll
give
be
us
All right.
a time limit.
We'll be snappy.
We've got, all right.
Maybe yes, no answer.
All right, in terms of time limit, I'll ask Maureen to put maybe a minute.
30
on.
seconds.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Okay, fine.
Yep.
She's going to get out of She's going to get out of technology.
Yep.
While we're waiting for Maureen to get her timing equipment.
I get my bell back.
It's all right.
Just say ding.
Yeah. Just yell stop.
All right, ticket number, oh, there it is. Ticket number 63. Could you put your hand up? Pass. Oh, you did. Yes, okay, thank you. 64. Right. Where are we going this time?
Oh, we're going from
Down here, yep.
Thank you.
Thomas.
Question is, would you support and promote plans to provide the northern suburbs with regular buses directly from Johnsonville to the Hut? If yes, how long will we have to wait for this?
I've actually never thought of that before, but in thinking about it, how else would you get to the hut? You'd obviously need to catch at least two buses, and what a journey that would be. As a regular bus user, I would think, yes, why wouldn't you do something like that? How long? I'm sorry, I have no idea.
You could catch a bus from Wellington to Naranga and get on the train from Naranga, it takes you straight into Wellington.
Yeah.
So, you know,
You can actually change buses at the bottom of the gorge.
we want one from here though.
Yes, good idea. There's probably lots and lots of actual routes that need to be looked at like that, and I am eager to hear from the incumbents down the other end what they've been doing about it.
I'd love to say yes, I'd love to promise everything, but I think that's a really difficult ask. To make it popular, it would have to be frequent. To make it frequent, you are putting in a huge amount of money for something that might take a decade to really grow. So I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying it's something that I would see happening easily. It would be very expensive.
Building on that, I would say you'd need to do a feasibility to see how much demand there is. Maybe an interim solution, again, very unpopular with Chris though, would be the on-demand services that are currently being... The smaller fleet of on-demand services that are currently trialled in Tawa, that could be an interim solution. And I heard, and maybe if the trains don't turn into buses, the train scenario might actually work. I'm just talking about the hut line, that's always a bus.
Fair enough.
Never train.
In principle, yes, but I think we should also explore the idea that's been suggested at the back there, that better integration of connections, if you like, between the bus and the rail to deliver to the hub.
Absolutely, and while you're on that, they could build a station down Middleton Road, so it takes all the people from the northern suburbs on the train straight into town, and you don't have the hub muck up here.
You're looking for a job, buddy?
Hang on. You've got a CV on you.
So my natural position to go to is a demand. You know, what would be the demand for it? The second thing is, with the new integrated ticketing system, which I know is not going to come through till 2024, you will have the ability to catch the bus down there, get straight onto the Nauranga chain, and you've only got that one changeover. And I just wonder whether the return on investment of putting those other buses in would be a good use of our rates and money.
I'm just going to keep it quick. Yeah, I think you've got to look at the demand, you've got to sit, and then you're going to have to prioritise whether that is going to trump any other particular projects. Other options to look at, there's a lot of, I know we've had the small buses on demand, but there's also other ways of getting groups of people from A to B, and with ride sharing, you know, better integrated ride sharing type of apps that you might people might be able to do.
I think we do need more connections by public transport between the east and the west. We can't promise everything though. The number 80 bus, which is a direct route from Wainuiomata into town, that's just been canned, commercial service, and so those people don't have a direct route. So there are a lot of areas where we do need those direct services, and we can't promise everything. But yes, we do need more connections between east and west.
So the reality of public transport is everybody wants to go direct, and actually what you find out in public transport is that it's a very private journey. Everybody has their own wondrous places that they want to go to, but the one thing they want to do is get on outside their house and go directly to the place that they want to go to. And we just can't deliver that in all instances, but what we can do is a better interchange type facility at the bottom of Naranga.
Ticket number 66.
These are literally, it's a two-part question on representation. I think they literally are yes or no. Do you support retention of the STV electoral system? Would you support a Māori constituency?
Yes, I support the STV system. I support the I support a Māori constituency, but for the regional council that would only give one person onto the regional council. Hence, we have decided not to adopt that system and instead look at better ways in which we can work with iwi, the 6 iwi across the region.
Yes to STV and yes to a Māori constituency if that is what mana whenua around the region wish to see.
Similar here, STV, yes. You've got to be a good treaty partner, and so the first thing you've got to do is talk to mana whenua and see what's best for them, so put it in their hands.
I'd not take your time by saying that I agree 100% with Darren Potter. On that question only.
Take the win.
Yes to STV. And in relation to Maori representation, so yeah, I support the idea of Maori awards, but we clearly had a situation where if it's going to be one representative of mana whenua, what mana whenua were saying to us, they didn't think that was the best way to actually have representation of iwi. So we have to be responsive to what mana whenua are telling us, because we obviously want to respect them as well.
Hell's yes to STV, and there's never a wasted vote, and with regards to Māori representation, whatever works best for mana whenua is where I stand.
If we had first passed the post, I would be a city councillor at the moment because I was third highest polling, but because of STV, I'm not. I'm not bitter. Having said that, I still support STV because the way it worked out is a lot of the people who voted for Sarah Free at number 1 voted for me as number 2, and Sarah and I have rather similar policies on a number of things, so instead you've got a mix of candidates with different policies. Not sure whether the City Council benefited particularly this last election with all the argument, but there we are. And the Māori Award, what Roger and Darren said, I agree with entirely.
Thanks for the question. STV, yes, I think it is the best way to go. It's very confusing though, and I think it could be explained much, much better. And I think that people actually are put off by the fact that they don't understand how it works. And I think that's a problem, and it's not communicated very well. As for the Māori Ward, I do support it, and I think we should have one.
Yes to STV. As for Maori representation, I do support having a Maori ward. However, as my colleagues have already said, they've had some discussion, and local iwi said no, but I'd like to know how we actually are going to hear their voice.
Yeah, we're cracking through.
That's right.
We are, aren't we? Ticket number 60. Ticket number 60? That's it?
That's it. Coming number 60, okay. Time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the applause. What I'd like to just say, this has been a great evening. It's been fantastic in terms of your candidates' presentations, and also the question and answer session. I think there's a compliment definitely due to the candidates, and I'd ask the audience to show their appreciation to the candidates. And I think it's also appropriate the candidates show their appreciation to the audience. And thank you everyone for contributing to the evening in the right spirit. That's really made a very enjoyable evening.
Thanks, Warren. Thanks, Warren. Thanks, Warren. Thanks, Warren.